Hello friends, this is Worm, and it's Monday, which means it's time for another episode of Exotic Recrafting, the series where we take a look at weak, underused, or straight up bad exotics inside of Destiny 2 and talk about how we can make them better inside of primarily PvE content. This is again directed pretty much towards PvE only, but of course, if you have an exotic that you want to see me talk about or have some ideas on how we could change it, tell me in the comments. But with that being said, this video is about Symmetry, which is an ARC, sorry, I almost said Void. It's an ARC scout rifle that it is 260. It's pretty neat, it's a pretty fun weapon. And we're kind of continuing our trend with talking about ARC weapons because we talked about Risk Runner last week, and now we're talking about Symmetry. And Symmetry is it's a decent little weapon, okay? And I know that's, you know, it's not used very much, and I know why, and I think, you know, we'll talk about why a little bit later on in the video, but it definitely feels like a really fun weapon. I think that one of the biggest things it struggles with is finding its niche in whatever activities that we're doing. But let's talk about the actual weapon itself, starting off with its exotic perk, which is called Revolution. Basically, you can swap fire modes by clicking and holding your alternate weapon action button or your reload button, basically, and it'll switch to Arc Seeker mode. And in Arc Seeker mode, the Arc Seekers fire at 150 rounds per minute instead of 260, which this scout rifle, it's a 260. Probably should have pointed that out, so it's fully automatic. But it switches to Arc Seeker mode, which fires at 150 rounds per minute, and it shoots these seeking projectiles. Okay, they're not bullets, they have a lot of travel time, but they do track, which is really neat. Also, its unique perk is a dynamic charge, and dynamic charge basically states precision hits build up dynamic charge. Swapping to Arc Seeker mode increases damage and partially reloads the magazine based on the number of charges. I'm reading it from the screen there because there's no way I would have remembered that. But with that being said, basically you get precision hits in its regular standard fire mode. It builds up stacks of dynamic charge. Then when you switch to Arc Seeker mode, it will activate a timer that goes, and you can basically just shoot for as long as you want. And of course, the higher stacks you have, stacking up to 20, will increase the damage that you get. It will also increase how much you reload the magazine. The reload effect is just 1-to-1. Okay, so if you have one stack of dynamic charge, it just reloads 1 round in the magazine. 20 will reload 20 rounds in the magazine, so on and so forth. But with that being said, it also has a catalyst too. I should probably point that out. The catalyst gives it +10 to its handling, +10 to its reload speed, and it also gives it the perk Eddy Current, which is really awesome. I think Eddy Current is such an underrated perk, but this video is not about Eddy Current. But yeah, that is this weapon. That's what it does and stuff like that. Now let's actually talk about what it does well. And that's kind of the problem. I don't really know what this scout rifle does well. When I was using it, and I use it in all manners of content, all different types of content, you know, seasonal content, nightfalls, regular strikes, you know, lost sector, stuff like that. Like I go in and I really get a feel for the weapon. I make sure to play solo content, I make sure to play, you know, team-oriented settings, stuff like that. And the biggest thing that I found Symmetry struggling with is finding its niche. Every single exotic, well, I'm not gonna say every single exotic, but most exotics in Destiny 2 have a niche. Sunshot, for example, it has an ad clear niche. Not boss damage, not high health target damage, ad clear. Arbalist has a high health target, you know, niche. It's good for barrier champions, it's good for shielded champions and stuff like that. But Symmetry here, it doesn't really do anything all that great. It doesn't clear ads super great. It is a 260 scout, which puts it kind of in a lower tier in terms of ad clear. Like I love 260s, don't get me wrong, but they're not the best at ad clear. They're basically, not almost, but most other weapons are going to outclass 260s and scout rifles in general when it comes to ad clear. So it's not really an ad clear weapon, but since it's a 260, it's also not a medium tier target, you know, an orange bar, champion, mini bosses, stuff like that. Like it doesn't handle those very well, and it doesn't handle bosses. It's not like a DPS monster or anything like that. Like dynamic charge is, you know, a nice little feature for additional damage, but it doesn't really do anything all that great. Like it can technically clear ads. Like if you have a group of ads clustered together, whenever you hit, you know, one of them and it explodes, it will explode. It will probably damage that group. But if ads are even remotely spread out, that's just not going to happen. The Arc Seeker mode in Revolution also doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. Again, it's not going to be a DPS monster. It's not even really great at taking down high health targets because it is slow. It fires those Arc Seekers at 150 rounds per minute, and they don't nuke any type of, you know, high health target and stuff like that. So this weapon is really struggling in its niche, but it also has the downside of having that alternate fire mode, which in my opinion really makes the weapon feel cumbersome to use. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because the rotation that you fire 20 shots, say at a boss. Okay, you get your 20 stacks of Revolution, then you switch to it, and as soon as you start shooting, it starts a little timer, and that timer counts down. When that timer's out, you run out of, you stay in Arc Seeker mode, but it doesn't deal nearly as much damage. And Arc Seeker mode is not something you should be using if you are just playing the game. Like, the Arc Seeker mode is not really all that great unless you have stacks of Revolution, or stacks of dynamic charge, sorry, is what I should say. So it's not really something that's all that great to use, but because it has that timer, it makes it feel really awkward, because you can change from the 260 round per minute to the 150 version on a flash. Like, you can change to 260s for one kill, you can change to 150s, back and forth, but the timer that starts whenever you start shooting with those dynamic charge stacks is really what throws the weapon off. And the reason why I say this is because when I was using it, I was shooting, you know, and I'd have 20 stacks of dynamic charge. Apologies. I'd have 20 stacks of dynamic charge. I have the 10 second, I think it's 10 seconds, 10-second timer going in the background, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm getting kills, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then it runs out of time. So the Arc Seekers are now don't do nearly as much damage. I actually never tested the actual damage bonus that it gets, which I should have, but oh well. But I'm still shooting in Arc Seeker mode, and it was almost confusing, because I was like, okay, why am I not dealing as much damage? Oh, that's right, I have to switch back to Arc Seeker, or I have to switch back to the regular mode. So one of the first changes that I would probably make is I would just overhaul the weapon so that you can't, whenever you run out of time, whenever you run out of time on Revolution, it automatically switches back to the 260 mode. Even if they want to keep the animation, just automatically activate the animation. That way you're not stuck in this awkward Arc Seeker mode where you're like, why is it not dealing much damage? Oh, that's right. Then you got to switch it, and it feels so slow and cumbersome to use, like we had just said a second ago. So I think the first change would be, of course, making that to where it automatically reverts. As soon as your timer's up, have it revert. I would almost go as far to say, you know, unless you have stacks of dynamic charge, you can't switch the weapon. You can't switch the fire rates until you have at least one precision hit, 1 stack of dynamic charge. But I also think that would kind of take away from the weapon, because one of the exotic factors of the weapon is the fact that you can change it on the fly. You can change it from the tracking 150 to the hit scan 260, back and forth. And so I don't want to necessarily take all that away, but allowing players to have more viability in their play by switching it automatically back would help the loop, because it's like, oh, okay, I'm out of charge, so let me get some precision shots. You shoot your 20 precision shots into a boss's chest or something like that, or crit, whatever, and switch it back over to Revolution, so that now you've got that big damage, then it runs out, it automatically switches back. So it's like, okay, it reminds you to constantly keep the loop going. And with its current state, the loop is easily something to forget about. And again, by the end of my play session with this weapon, the last couple strikes I was doing, that's typically what I round out with, is just some strikes. Last couple strikes that I was doing though, I was, okay, now I remember I have to switch back. But until that point, it was just kind of weird, and it just felt really awkward, and it felt really slow. Now, another thing, this weapon is an arc weapon. It even has eddy current, which of course eddy current is an absolute S tier perk if you are on an arc subclass, or really if you can keep yourself amplified. So prismatic would work well as well. But it doesn't lend itself to the arc kits. And we have had so many exotics, and we've talked about other exotics that, you know, are arc and they should do jolt. You know, Trinity Ghoul should do jolt. Jolt. Risk Runner should do jolt, blah, blah, blah. But we have not talked about any arc weapons that should have an arc blind feature, and this would be a great place to put this one. I think that a change that Bungie could potentially make to this weapon is whenever you are killing enemies and you have, say, an X number of dynamic charge stacks, you know, 10, 15, 20, whatever you want it to be, when you shoot those seekers, not only do they hit and explode, but they also blind enemies nearby. Right? That way you could have some functionality in the arc kit that's not just jolt. Because I think everybody in their mom wants to, you know, put jolt on everything, and jolt is a great option. And you know, I think we should also entertain the idea of potentially putting jolt on the weapon, because jolt, again, it wouldn't hurt the weapon. It would only make it better. It would kind of fill it more into that niche, you know, that ad clear niche if it had jolt. But at the same time, I don't think that jolt just needs to be on every single arc weapon. And I think that instead of having jolt on this weapon, we could do something with blind, and something with that dynamic charge would be a great option. Now, I also think that you could have, as part of the catalyst or something, you could also make it where once you hit, you know, say 4 precision shots on a target, you create a blinding blast. Not an explosion, but a blinding blast, similar to a disorienting grenade. It doesn't deal damage, but it will blind enemies in the area. It'll blind whatever, you know, champions are shooting at. And in fact, since it's blind, it's arc blind, it would actually stun unstoppable champions to give it that kind of built-in anti-champion feature. Then you could pair it with, you know, various artifact mods and stuff like that. Like I think this season we do have unstoppable scout rifle anyways, but you could do something like that. That way there is just this blinding capability, this arc synergy within the weapon that's inherently working with it. But yeah, I think that would be a really strong option. And I think just finding some way to let it fill a niche, you know, if you added that blinding capability to the weapon, it would have a niche. The niche would be, hey, now it is a, you know, a utility weapon. Okay, because there are some weapons that are utility. Lumina, for example. Lumina is a utility weapon. Like, I don't know of anybody who goes around using Lumina because it's just an insanely good gun. It is a very good weapon, but it's great because it's, you know, something that you would use in a team setting to give your teammates a boost, to give yourself that boost. It's more of a utility weapon, and this weapon could be something similar. If it had the ability to blind enemies, you could use it as a utility weapon. Okay, you know, I'm going to pull out Symmetry now to stun this overload champion. I'm going to, you know, get Symmetry out so that, you know, we're going into a room and there's a bunch of enemies around. I'm going to change to Arc Seeker mode so that I can blind these enemies that are around here. That way, you know, give us some breathing room. You want to go in for a revive even, you know, blind some enemies, stuff like that. Just go in and take care of business. But again, it would give it that place in this in the meta, in the sandbox, because currently it doesn't do anything perfect. And Destiny is not a game that caters to jack of all trade weapons, okay? Like weapons that are good for ad clear and boss damage and stuff like that. This is one of the reasons why I don't use Outbreak Perfected, because Outbreak Perfected is a jack of all trades. Now, granted, Outbreak Perfected is a lot higher on the tier list than Symmetry, because Outbreak Perfected actually clears ads really well. It does damage really well. Like, it is a tremendous weapon. But again, like, Destiny's a game where there are 3 weapon categories that we have. I can put on a primary, I can put on a special, I can put on a heavy. I can use my primary ammo to clear ads. I can use my special weapon to handle special case situations like champions or high health targets. And I can use my heavy weapon to deal boss damage. Or I can switch it around a little bit. I can use my primary for ad clear. I can use my special weapon for boss damage. I can use my heavy for, you know, additional ad clear. Like, you know, you can cater to whatever playstyle you want. That we don't need weapons that fill every single niche at a mediocre level. But anyways, that's Symmetry. That's my thoughts on it. Again, I don't think it's a bad weapon by any means. As I was using the weapon, it felt really fun to use, but like I said, it had that cumbersome aspect of having to switch between the modes constantly. Oh, it felt like I was switching between those modes like every 10 seconds basically. But it just doesn't do anything all that great. But that being said, that's my thoughts on Symmetry. That's how I feel like we could change it. Let me know your thoughts on it. Do you think that you have any better ideas? Do you like my ideas? Just tell me all that stuff in the comments. Of course, if you liked today's video, do me a favor, drop a like, helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, conversations, debates, so on and so forth. And do me a favor, watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you would like them. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now, guys.